Welcome to the Mindful Escape podcast. My name's Leighton Jewett, and I am your host. And today we have not one, but two very special guests on the show. Ro and Evan started their business about 5 years ago, and they talk about the transition from their very well established careers into the entrepreneurial world. The thing I love most about this episode, and I'm sure you'll love it too, is the authenticity behind their story and how honest they are about the harsh realities of starting your own business, the challenges that come up along the way, and the lessons they learn. So I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Let's jump straight in. Evan and Ro, welcome to the Mindful Escape. Evan, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about who you are and what you've been up to.
Absolutely. So really happy to be here. Thank you so much, Layden, for having both Ro and I. And I am co-founder of Brutal Buddha along with Ro. I have been living abroad on and off for the last several years. I am American, as if you can't tell from the US accent, if there is one. And I'm a basketball player. I like to work out. I'm really passionate about making impact, right? Whatever that looks like, and also healthcare. So I've had a health and wellness practice, a mindfulness practice, meditation, yoga, etc., which I incorporate into my day-to-day life, what we say on and off the mat. So in my professional life as well.
Amazing. And Ro, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Leighton. Great to be here. So alongside Evan, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Brutal Buddha. We've built the world's first protective athleisure brand for men. A little bit of background about me. I am a health and wellness enthusiast. I love all things board sports, wake surfing, wakeboarding, snowboarding. I'm an ex D1 collegiate rugby player, played soccer, lots of sports growing up. And yeah, I love traveling. I've been to over 50 countries. And yeah, I'm very interested in mindfulness and, as we've built this brand, learning more about not only the physical benefits of, exercise and well-being, but also the mental benefits. So things like, your MBTI test, emotional intelligence, all those types of things I'm quite interested in. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, amazing. It sounds fascinating. I'm really excited to find out a little bit more. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, let's just jump back a little bit to when you were both kind of working in your corporate kind of roles, what you were doing, and was there something that triggered you or encouraged you to move from that kind of work to building your own business? Evan, do you want to go first?
Surely. So it's a great question, and I ponder on this quite a bit. I would say my career started off in a direction that I thought would be a lifelong passion, which it still remains to be a passion in some way, shape, or form. But I started my career in medical sciences. So I went to school, I did pre-med as far as my bachelor's degree, and I had pursued a doctorate, right? I was pursuing an MD, and I was shadowing many doctors, working in the ER, doing hospital administration, and really working more on the clinical side of medicine. In which time I realized, in my early 20s that I'm actually more passionate about global business. So of course there's Doctors Without Borders and several ways you can, continue in that way, still serving and, practicing surgery, whatever that looks like. But I ultimately said I would come back to it if the passion remained over years and years. And I went and got my MBA. So I decided to try my hand at business, and that led me to an international career, right? So that is where I started my corporate life at a company called Gartner. And I think in your 20s, it's important, at least for many people, it's important to learn, right? Especially if you're not, naturally crafted with, business or entrepreneurship right from the get-go. I think it's good to learn. So I joined a technology advisory company, which I then spun off and did my own startup, which is a software company in travel technology, had some great experiences, and then found myself back in a mid-sized enterprise, a small company, smallish, in which I was managing Asia. So I was overseeing the growth and development across Asia Pacific. And then from there, again, took another stab at startup with Ro and went full time about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So it's been a great journey. I've done anything from, healthcare, like I mentioned, to sales and marketing, to entrepreneurship as a founder and co-founder.
Nice. Okay. And Ro, did you have a similar background or very different?
I did have a somewhat similar background, slightly different. So I had more of a finance background. I was actually, going into investment management, global banking, right, which is what I started in right out of university in New York City, basically selling software to large financial institutions. And it was great. I do have a passion for personal finance. I do have a passion for global markets, supply chain, all of those types of things. But for me, I mean, you asked about like when was it when you kind of like knew that, maybe you needed to change, from corporate. And I guess for me, I've learned over time that I like impact and I like working on very tangible things. And so what I found at my, corporate job was that I was, selling a lot of things that were not very tangible, right? Like, you don't really feel software, you don't really see its impact. The financial markets are obviously happening all around us. But I really wanted to build a physical product that could impact, in our case, men and help them live longer, healthier, but most importantly, fulfilling lives. So that's what I wanted to do, was build something tangible that I could see, that I could notice was helping others. And yeah, that was really, I think, when I had that turning point. And I'm also somebody who I love a good challenge. And so, when you're in kind of your same role and you're sort of growing in it, you start to get comfortable, and I don't like getting really comfortable. So I wanted to dive into a new challenge and really build something from scratch. And so that's really, really exciting for me.
Yeah. The thing I love is that both of you have come from a background which are both very good careers and probably positions you could continue stay in for the rest of your lives, right? So the fact that you've both kind of stepped outside and gone that little bit further to create your own business is really lovely to hear. I think one of the things I'm curious about is, because you are both working these full-time jobs, and it sounds like you transitioned over time and then only in the last couple of years have gone full-time. What were the kind of challenges around that in terms of time, finances, and anything else that came up? I don't know if you want to respond to that one, Evan.
Absolutely. Finances are definitely critical, right? When you're planning to build a business, you want to make sure that you have your needs met. So I do think whether you have to find a side hustle, to bring in cash flow, or, continue in your corporate, role or mid-sized enterprise role to put some money away, I do think, to be able to avoid the intense stress of worrying about, where your next meal is going to come from. And this probably applies more so to, aspiring entrepreneurs out of college or even out of high school, right? It does make it tougher, but it also kind of molds you. We have lots of friends who've done it right out of school and, have had to live on a very frugal budget. So, when it comes to planning and strategizing, you do want to build some sort of runway for yourself. And I would say a slight cushion if possible, right? Because then if you're not as stressed, you can actually focus more, the mind can open up more, you can get more creative. So in the beginning for us, it was really critical to at least, see through our roles, not just financially, but also, doing the right thing by the company, right? Ro and I both held people leadership positions, and, it would have been a little premature to just jump as soon as we had the idea. We wanted to let the idea grow legs. We wanted to see what it was like to work with one another. So Ro and I were meeting up at 5:30, 6 in the morning, a couple times a week before going into the office. We were going to the gym 3 times a week on the other days, going to the gym for an hour and 20 minutes before work, right? So we were pretty much seeing each other every single day before we would go into our corporate life. And then after, we would always get together, we would share a lot of messages back and forth. So there's a lot of things that we could talk about here, but I won't hug the mic on that one. I'll let Ro kind of weigh in since we were in the journey together.
Yeah, I think those are all really good points, Evan. And, I think it's important to have that financial cushion, to work outside of hours. And I think we were on a podcast, funny enough, last night, Leighton, we were telling you about that. We have our own podcast called the Longevity Podcast, and we had a guy on there who said, it's really important for entrepreneurs to have two things, right? One is excellence and one is clarity. And I think, what you're going to find as an entrepreneur is, especially at the beginning, is your to-do list is going to be in the thousands, and you're never going to get everything done. So I think it's important to be very organized, very focused, to get things done, and have some fun with each other, because it can be a little bit stressful at first. It's daunting, it's overwhelming, and I think one piece of advice for entrepreneurs that I would highly recommend to have a co-founder. I think that's one of the biggest ways you're going to increase your level of success, is having a co-founder, from an accountability perspective, but also from just a pure motivational energy, mindset perspective as well. And at Brutal Buddha, we focus a lot on mindset. That's our theme for March, is we're in Mindset March. So yeah, we're excited, but appreciate the question. I'm sure we could go on, for hours about this.
Yeah, I'm interested on the mindset piece, thinking about the time that you were spending together before your full-time jobs, finding time for your health and fitness and everything else as well. How did that affect your mental health?
Yeah, it definitely took a bit of a toll. I would say both Ro and I found meditation and yoga to be extremely helpful, but I would say we were burning the candle on both ends, as they say, right? And understandably so. We were both passionate, but we also wanted to maintain good standing in our roles. As I mentioned, we were working in pretty sizable matrix organizations, and holding quite a lot of responsibility. So we also are the kind of people that wouldn't let our teams down in our current climates. And we were both pretty open, right? Like we weren't hiding it. We weren't in intense stealth mode. We were just hustling, right? Doing both at the same time. And serial entrepreneurs sometimes have 10, 15, 20 businesses, and I'm talking about ultra seasoned serial entrepreneurs. But it's very doable if you manage your time properly, right? And if you are able to accelerate your energy into the time that you actually spend working. So of course there's evangelists on this concept like Tim Ferriss, and you've got Tony Robbins, preaching about energy management and anti-goals, and cutting things out of your life that are not helpful. So Ro and I steadily started to do that. When we first met, we were still having fun. We were in our 20s. We were traveling just for the sake of traveling. And at some point we really looked at each other and into the mirror at ourselves and said, look, if we're going to have this wide scale impact to help 100 million men and women over time, to live longer, healthier lives and live more inspired and fulfilled lives, right? Live, connect, and feel better, which is our vision. Then we need to really cut out the things that are not adding to that mission and that vision.
Yeah, and ultimately not serving your customer or client.
Exactly.
So, Ro, along this journey, I'm sure you've come across loads of challenges. What would you say one of your biggest challenges has been so far?
I think, certainly I'm gonna, because that's a broad question, but I'm gonna relate it to entrepreneurship specifically. Sure. I think that for me personally, one of the biggest challenges has been, knowing when to bring in somebody else to do a role that either you're not good at yourself, or you think you're good at, but you're not making good progress. Especially if you're a hands-on person who, wants to kind of run with everything and make it work. I think there were a lot of moments, and there still are, in Brutal Buddha, where Evan and I have some really big, important projects, and we're just really struggling to move the needle, right? We talk about these big rocks, things like getting up your new website, getting your first sales, getting, landing into a retail store, for example, if you're just an online business, hiring your first, major employee, who you're going to give equity or a high salary to. We've just made a lot of mistakes, frankly, and we've spent a lot of time on things, sometimes 6, 12 months on something that really should only take 2 weeks, if I'm going to be honest. So, speed is entrepreneurs' best friend, but it's also entrepreneurs' enemy. So you want to move really fast, but you want to move smart. And so, there's a quote by Jeff Bezos that I always remember that, it's basically you're going to need to make decisions with 70% of the information. You're never going to have 100%. So you need to basically, once you have a healthy amount of information, you need to make the decision, you need to execute. And I think it's really important that even if you disagree, like even when Evan and I disagree, when we agree to move forward, we're all in and we're going to make it work. And so those are some of the things that I've learned over time.
Yeah, it's so good. And I think making mistakes along the journey is inevitable. And it's obviously learning from these that we grow and the business grows. Evan, have you got any other challenges that you think worth mentioning?
100%, 100%. I think I would second everything Rose said, along the lines of decision making, speed, eradicating any doubt, right? Like those kinds of things definitely come up for entrepreneurs. Luckily, Ro and I have not had any doubt in this business, and that's especially because we've steadily seen it grow and we've got good customer feedback, and that's really important for us. But I've seen other entrepreneurs have a lot of doubt, go into dark places, and really wonder if they should keep pushing, if it's time to throw in the towel. And sadly, we've seen some, end prematurely, or flatline, right? And kind of just, stay as a small business. So I think the biggest thing as you transition from, whether it's a mid-sized company or a smaller startup or an enterprise, when you're moving to entrepreneurship, you have to be willing to ride the waves. There will be down moments, right? So that's always a challenge for us. And this will tie back into our personal lives as well, right? Like, Ro and I have experienced, several different challenges as individuals, interrelational challenges, a lot of grief that has come up along the way. And we've found ways to support one another, right? And also hold a mirror up for one another, right? To be able to say, hey, look, like, okay, like this is horrible, this is bad, but now it's time to focus on the future, right? So we do a lot of work around future self, which I'm sure you're aware of, visualization. And I think those are some of the things that have helped us to overcome some of these more personal challenges, because, at the end of the day, we do believe in work-life harmony, right? And we carried ourselves in that way within our corporate lives, and we continue to this day in our startup lives.
At the start of that transition, when you were coming, I guess it was the point where you were leaving your jobs and going full time with the business. Were there any lessons that came up at that stage that you really remember as big lessons or something you'll never forget? I would go to Ro first on this one.
I don't know if it's a lesson, but one thing that I really didn't realize I was going to go through when I did leave my corporate job was I was a little bit sad in some ways. It sounds a bit strange, but because I was at my ex company for almost 10 years, I had built some really deep relationships with people. They're basically almost family members to me. So entrepreneurship is really exciting. And obviously it's great that Evan and I were co-founders, but I felt like my life was changing quite dramatically when I was going into entrepreneurship. And it was a strange feeling, kind of that last day I left the office and turned to my laptop and all that kind of stuff. So that was a weird feeling. But I'm sure some people have different feelings. Some people are probably like, hell yeah, like I'm ready to get the hell out of here. Let's go. I wasn't necessarily one of those people. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of one big thing I really didn't think I was going to experience. And then the other was just kind of sort of like there was the excitement, but then also just kind of the fear of the unknown. Like what, it's very, when you go from these like matrix organizations where you have your manager and you're coming in, you're clocking in, you're doing this, you're doing that. It's like everything's very structured. You don't ever need to worry about what you're doing. But when you're entrepreneurs, and Evan and I would go and we'd sit in the coffee shop, and it's a blank canvas, and you decide what you do every day, and you either get nothing done every day or you get a lot done every day. But you got to have structure. You got to create your own structure and create it for each other. And so that was another big learning I had was, holy shit, I have all this free time and all this, vision to do whatever I want, but I need to create some structure and, let's meet at this time, let's have these weekly calls, and let's do this and let's do that. So it's very easy to get kind of distracted and figure out, oh my God, I did nothing the last week. So.
Yeah. And Evan, was it similar lessons for you or completely different?
I had a quite unique experience because it was my second go at transitioning from corporate to startup. So I did it, 4 years prior. And, in that experience, it was definitely more daunting, I would say, the first time around when I went back to corporate, and I did it mostly so I could learn about the world of financial services, private equity, credit distressed debt. For me, it felt like it was going to be just this kind of open-ended journey where I build startup on the side and I keep dabbling in startup until something takes off and grows legs, so it becomes a no-brainer. I think that's an anomaly, right? I don't think there's too many people who can say they have that experience, right? They start something on the side and then it just blows up like crazy and they have no fear because it's already bringing in more cash than, a bigger salary for them than what their corporate jobs are bringing in. So, I think that's pretty rare. So for me, it was definitely more daunting the first time because it was pre-revenue, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this transition was post-revenue. So the one thing I felt, similar to Ro was wow, this is actually happening. The reality was setting in, but then I started to feel, in the last month or two before, actually making the jump, right? Once I knew the date and when I was going to start, making my exit plan and communicating that to my team, started to feel like I really wish I would have studied and learned more on the job, right? So I think so many people say, "Oh, I'll go to that seminar, or I'll say yes to that event, after hours, when I next time or the time after, I'm just going to relax." But one thing I would recommend to anybody who's in their current position is just soak it up, right? Soak it up. If you're there for 6 months or 6 years or anywhere in between, even 10 years, 15 years, 30, soak it up, be present, right? And I'm sure you practice a lot of that in your yoga practice and in your day-to-day life.
Yeah, it's interesting. You both mentioned fear as well. It's like making that leap. Ro, was there something that you did or found that helped you overcome that fear?
There were a few things. I think, right around that time, I was definitely practicing yoga quite regularly. 3 times a week, I was getting into my, my hatha 2 classes in Pure, and I was really starting to get into it, and I found it really therapeutic and relaxing. So that definitely helped. I think, it helped just getting back to that point that Evan said, visualization, what does the future look like? I'm a very forward thinking person. And so when I envisioned what the business and how many people we're going to impact, 10 years from now, I would just get so excited. So if I would have a rough day or the business is not moving or I'm scared, I would just remember the future is bright, I'm optimistic, the future is bright. And I had a good support network around me. I had a lot of entrepreneurs who were building their businesses around me, which were helping guide me. So I didn't feel alone. So I found that very helpful to have a network and a community of other entrepreneurs helping each other. I think without that, I would have had a hard time. Not to say I wouldn't have done it, but I would certainly have had a hard time without being in a network of community of small business owners.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Evan, obviously you talked about the visualization before. Did you have any other let's call it tactics that you use to help you overcome the fear? I know it was the second time for you, so maybe you felt a little bit more comfortable, but any kind of tips that you could recommend or suggest?
Yeah, the biggest one is just hustle, go all out, right? Like you're in more control of your destiny than you realize. So anytime I would feel that fear and like sit with it, I would then meditate on it. I would journal about it, and then I would go attack it, right? I would face it head on. So that's anything from our fundraising efforts, evangelizing the business, pitching it, getting feedback, going to events, networking, all the way to deep work sessions that Ro and I have done where we've whiteboarded, we've come up with amazing ideas, huge radical ideas of where we can take the business, dreaming huge, right? So yeah, I would say tackling it head on and just running at it versus running away from it. Outside of that, the consistent practice with the gym and regular workouts and a good sleep routine is definitely helpful as well when facing fear.
Yeah, I guess that comes back to what Rose said as well about having your structure not only within the business but outside the business as well, looking after yourself, your well-being, mental health, physical health, and all of that. Um, Before we finish up, could you give a little bit of advice to either your younger self when you were just starting the business or someone who's in that position now? What's your one golden nugget?
Yeah, I can jump in there. So I would say start today, right? Like if I could talk to myself at whatever it is, 22, 23, 24, I would just say start today, right? There were so many goals or projects or books or things that I wanted to learn. And you say, oh, I've got time, I'm young, whatever, I can go to the beach and I can be laissez-faire. And that's not to say you need to be a robot, right? But I felt like in the micro, I would push too many things off to tomorrow. And tomorrow quickly became next year. And then over time became a decade later, right? There's still books that I have written down in my journals from 10 years ago that I have not got to. And that's just a matter of priorities, right? Like new priorities come up that you're not aware of. So if you have an instinct for something or if you have a gut feeling, follow it in the moment. Set a plan for yourself, put it on the calendar, and hold yourself accountable, right? So one thing Ro and I joined at the start of our entrepreneurial journey this go around with Brutal Buddha was an accountability group called Knox. And prior to that, maybe you share with a couple friends or your teammates in the corporate world what your goals are, right? Personal and professional and familial, right? Like where do you want to go? What do you want to achieve? But if you build a strong group, a core group of people who are going to hold you accountable to the degree that if you don't reach the goals, there's, maybe some sort of workout or exercise you have to do that's strenuous, militaristic style. Like it depends. Every group is different. But for us, we had a combination of, punishment and reward. And it really helped us to stay true to our goals and push ourselves harder and harder and harder. You release dopamine when you hit your goals, right? But you can't hit your goals if you don't create them. So I would say set goals sooner, earlier in your career and go after them in real time.
Amazing. And Ray?
Yeah, I think for me, it would have been to surround myself with more friends and mentors that have done what I want to do. And so I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I knew I wanted to build a business. But frankly, a lot of my friends and mentors were not necessarily people who had done those two things. So, whereas I didn't really get that until, I moved to Hong Kong and I met Evan in 2017 and we started this business in 2018, at least the idea. So that's what I would have done because I spent a lot of time in my 20s kind of thinking about business ideas and talking about it and, a lot of talking, not a lot of doing. And I was talking to people who were not entrepreneurs. They weren't, I was talking to my coworkers. I was talking to my, kind of family members, some of which who were not entrepreneurs. So, I think it really helps to have people who've been there and have done that, and they kind of coach you along. And I had one good buddy who is an entrepreneur, and he's like, when are you quitting, Ro? Like, what? I love that you're talking about all these things, but what day are you quitting? Like, because the business is never going to take off until you quit. And that's when I had a light bulb, like, you know what? He's right. I got to just quit. So I set a date. I set an intention, and that date was December 31st of 2020. And I set that date a year in advance. And I said, I'm going to quit on this day. And Evan knows that's the day I quit.
So good.
Regardless
Love
of
that.
circumstance, regardless,
I
which is
said, I
really
don't
cool
care
to
what's
see.
happening. I'm quitting on this day.
Yeah, I love that Ro was talking about not speaking to the right people and just talking. It's like the ideas and talking, but no action. And then Evan's piece of advice is start today. So essentially, you're saying the same thing. It's just get going. And I love the setting the intention and giving yourself a year is great. I mean, I think a lot of people put too much pressure on themselves and be like, okay, I'm going to do this next month. But it doesn't have to be next month. You can take your time. And I think a year is a great timeline as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I would just
absolutely.
say if you are in a corporate setting, right, you don't have to jump so immediately, or you don't have to start your own enterprise or your own entity immediately outside of that. You can start to gain experience by building kind of a micro startup within the role and function that you have for, let's say, a 3 to 6 month period. Now, that's not to say don't start today. And, I'm being hypocritical to everything Ro and I just said. It's just don't feel that it has to be one way or the other, right? You can start creating projects, and there's a lot of companies out there that incentivize this, right? The big tech companies, obviously, not lately with some of the big layoffs, but like historically, a lot of companies would give you, 3 hours or 6 hours to focus on your own innovative project. And if you're in a company that doesn't, right, just create time yourself, right? You can do it during lunch hours. You can do it, towards the end of the day when people start going home, whenever it makes sense for you. But just start to work on something that you feel good and invigorated by. Because if you're invigorated by it, it's going to grow legs.
Yeah. Something that came up in the last episode was it doesn't have to be 0% or 100%. You can just do a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. And I think you kind of highlighted that there. So that's really nice. Cool. Thank you, guys. No, it's been great speaking to you both. Where can people find you online?
Yeah, they can find us at brutalbuddhagear.com. That's our website. And then our Instagram is lowercase brutal, BRUTAL underscore Buddha, BUDDHA. And then we also have, a Facebook community group with over 6,000 male yoga practitioners. And then we have, a TikTok, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. And then if you ever want to have a call with us, it's just Calendly, CALENDLY.com/brutal Buddha, Calendly.com/brutal Buddha. And you can hop on the phone with Evan and I anytime.
Amazing. Brilliant. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
We'd love to extend a discount code for your community. So we will go ahead and share that with you after the call. This way you can, pass it along when you publish the podcast and the video cast. You can put it in the comments, and people can enjoy a little bit of a perk, for being part of the wider Mindful Escape and Brutal Buddha community. I'll be spending some time in San Francisco, Miami area, and New York City. So if anybody listens to your podcast in the coming 3 weeks, definitely reach out to us, because Ro and I will be doing some road shows. We'll be doing some events in Florida and in New York. So stay tuned. And more importantly, stay brutal.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for listening. That was a really exciting episode. The biggest takeaway for me was about structure. Ro really talked about structuring your day for your business, making sure you dedicate time, whether you're still in your corporate job or you've already transitioned full-time into your entrepreneur lifestyle. Structuring your workday is really important. And then Evan also touches on structuring outside of your workday, so fitting time for your health, your mental well-being, your family, and your friends. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. If you did, please give it a follow, ring the bell, and we'll see you same time next week.